Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his face as he crouched behind a broken wall. The concrete was hot from the alien weapons that had been hitting it all day. His rifle felt heavy in his hands, and he knew he only had 12 shots left. Around him, the city of New Angeles burned. 3 months ago, the sky had turned dark with enemy ships. They came without warning, dropping from space like deadly birds. The aliens called themselves Zephyrians, and they wanted Earth. They wanted everything on it, including the people. Jake had been a police officer before the war started. He knew how to shoot, how to stay calm when things got bad. But nothing had prepared him for this. These aliens were tall and thin with skin that looked like colored glass. They had 4 arms each, and their weapons could cut through steel like butter. His radio crackled with static. "Morrison, you still alive?" It was Captain Lisa Hayes, his commanding officer. "Still here," Jake whispered into the radio. "But they got Rodriguez and Turner. I think I'm the last one in Sector 7. Pull back to the school. We're making one final stand there." Jake looked around the corner. 3 Zephyrian soldiers were walking down the street, their crystal-like armor shining in the sunlight. They moved like they owned the place, which Jake supposed they did now. One of them pointed at his hiding spot and said something in their strange musical language. He ran. The school was 6 blocks away, but it felt like 6 miles. Every step brought more enemy fire. Jake could hear the buzz of their plasma weapons behind him. The air smelled like burning metal and smoke. When he reached the school, only 15 human soldiers were left. They had set up in the gymnasium using desks and chairs to make walls. It wasn't much protection, but it was all they had. "How many shells do we have left?" asked Lisa. "Maybe 50 rounds total," said Sergeant Pete Collins. "And that's counting the bullets in our guns." Jake sat down next to the others. They all looked tired. They had been fighting for so long, and they all knew how this would end. The Zephyrians had better weapons, better armor, and more soldiers. Earth's armies had been beaten everywhere else. New Angeles was one of the last cities still fighting. "My daughter is 8 years old," said Private Kate Miller. She was looking at a picture in her wallet. "She's with my sister in Canada. Do you think the aliens will hurt kids?" "I don't know," Lisa said quietly. "I hope not." Jake thought about his own family. His parents lived in Florida. His brother worked in Chicago. Were they still alive? Were they prisoners now? The Zephyrians had cut off all communication between cities. No one knew what was happening anywhere else. A loud voice came from outside. It spoke English, but with a strange accent. "Humans in the building, you will surrender now. Put down your weapons and come out with your hands visible." The soldiers looked at each other. No one moved. "If you do not surrender, we will destroy the building," the voice continued. "What do we do?" whispered Pete. Lisa checked her rifle. "We're soldiers. We fight." The attack came from all sides. The aliens had surrounded the school during the night. Their plasma weapons tore through the walls like they were made of paper. The humans fired back, but their bullets just bounced off the alien armor. Jake saw Pete get hit by a plasma bolt. The man fell without making a sound. Kate was trying to help a wounded soldier when another blast caught her. One by one, his friends fell around him. Jake kept shooting until his rifle clicked empty. He reached for Pete's gun, but a plasma bolt hit the wall next to his head. The heat made him dizzy. "Enough," said a voice in perfect English. 3 Zephyrians walked into the gym. Their leader was taller than the others, with skin that changed, colors from blue to purple. He looked at the dead humans with what might have been sadness. "You fought well," the alien said to Jake. "Better than most species do." Jake stood up slowly. His hands were empty, but he didn't raise them. "Are you going to kill me?" "No. You are too valuable to kill." The alien walked closer. Jake could see his own reflection in the creature's crystal-like face. "My name is Commander Veltar. You humans are interesting. Most species surrender when they see our ships. You kept fighting even when you knew you could not win." "We don't like bullies," Jake said. Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Yes, we have noticed this. It will make you useful slaves." 2 smaller aliens came forward with metal collars. Jake backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The collar snapped around his neck with a sharp click. Immediately, he felt different, weaker, like something inside him had been turned off. The collar will let you understand our language, Veltar explained. It will also make sure you obey orders. Try to remove it, and it will kill you. Jake touched the metal around his throat. It was warm and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Where are you taking me? To Christos, our homeworld. Queen Zelia likes to see the strongest warriors from each planet we conquer. You should feel honored. I don't feel honored. Veltar tilted his head. No, I suppose you would not. Humans are strange that way. They walked Jake outside to a waiting transport ship. The city around them was quiet now. No more gunfire. No more explosions. Just smoke and silence. As they lifted off, Jake looked down at Earth getting smaller below him. He thought about Kate's daughter, about his family, about all the people who were now slaves like him. The anger in his chest felt like fire. The collar might make his body weak, but it couldn't touch what was in his heart. The transport ship climbed higher, carrying Jake away from everything he had ever known. But as he watched his planet disappear, he made himself a promise. Somehow, some way, he would find a way to fight back. The journey to Christos took 2 weeks. Jake spent most of that time in a small cage with 20 other prisoners. There were humans like him, but also aliens from other worlds. A blue-skinned woman from a planet called Altair sat next to him. Her name was Nina, and she had been a teacher before the Zephyrians came. How long have you been their prisoner? Jake asked her. 3 years, Nina said. Her voice was quiet and sad. My people tried to fight, but we were not strong enough. The Zephyrians took the smartest of us to work in their cities. Across from them sat an old creature that looked like a giant lizard. His skin was gray and covered in scars. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. I am Grix, the old alien said. My people, the Calaxians, have been slaves for 50 years. I was young when they came to our world. Jake looked at the other prisoners. They all had the same look in their eyes. They had given up hope. They moved slowly, spoke quietly, and never looked at the guards. The collar around Jake's neck made him feel weak, but his anger was still burning inside him. When the ship finally landed, Jake got his first look at Christos. The planet was beautiful in a cold way. Everything was made of crystal that grew from the ground like trees. The buildings changed colors as the light hit them. 2 suns hung in the purple sky, making everything shimmer. Pretty, isn't it? Said one of the guards. He spoke English now that Jake had the collar. Queen Zelia built all of this with slave labor. Your hands will help make it even bigger. They were loaded onto trucks and driven through the crystal city. Jake saw thousands of slaves working on construction sites. They carried huge blocks of crystal, swept the streets, and built new towers. All of them wore the metal collars. All of them moved like they were half dead. The truck stopped at the biggest building Jake had ever seen. It was made of black crystal and reached high into the sky. The Obsidian Palace, the guard called it. This was where Queen Zelia lived, and where Jake would work. The slave quarters were underground. Hundreds of beds were arranged in long rows. The air was hot and hard to breathe. A Zephyrian overseer with red skin stood waiting for them. I am Kexidal, the overseer said. You will work for me now. You will carry crystal blocks from the mines to the construction sites. You will work 12 hours each day. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not fight. You will not try to escape. If you break these rules, you will be punished. Jake was given a bed next to Grix. The old Calaxian helped him understand how things worked. The collars make us weak, but they do not kill our minds, Grix whispered when the guards were not listening. Some of us remember who we were before, but most forget after a few years. The work breaks their spirits. How have you kept your spirit alive for 50 years? Jake asked. Grix smiled, showing sharp teeth. I remember my son. He was killed when the Zephyrians came. Every day I work, I think about him. It keeps the fire burning inside me. The work was harder than anything Jake had ever done. The crystal blocks weighed as much as cars, but the collars gave the slaves just enough strength to lift them. They worked under the hot suns, carrying the blocks up long ramps to where new towers were being built. Many slaves collapsed from the heat. The guards would kick them until they got up, or drag them away if they could not. Jake helped the ones who fell when the guards were not looking. He shared his water with those who needed it. After the first week, Jake noticed something. The other slaves were watching him. When he helped someone, they would nod slightly. When he stood up straight, instead of slouching, they would straighten up too. When he smiled at them, some of them smiled back. Nina from Altair started working near him. "You are different from the others," she said during their short rest break. "Most new slaves break quickly, but you seem to get stronger." "I'm not getting stronger," Jake said. "I'm getting angrier." On his second week, Jake saw something that made his blood boil. A young human boy, maybe 16 years old, had dropped a crystal block. The weight was too much for him. Overseer Kexdal raised his shock stick to beat the boy. "Wait," Jake called out. Kexdal turned to look at him. "Did you speak without permission, human?" Jake walked over to the boy and helped him lift the crystal block. "He's just a kid. The block is too heavy for him." "All slaves must carry their share," Kexdal said. "If he cannot work, he is useless. Then give him lighter work. He could clean or carry tools. You don't need to hurt him." The other slaves stopped working and stared. No one had ever talked back to an overseer before. Kexdal's face turned a darker shade of red. "You think you can tell me how to manage my slaves? I think beating children makes you weak, not strong." Kexdal hit Jake with the shock stick. Pain shot through his body and he fell to his knees. But he looked up at the overseer and did not cry out. "Get back to work," Kexdal snarled. Jake stood up slowly and went back to carrying crystal blocks. But he had made his point. The other slaves had seen him stand up for the boy. Word spread through the quarters that night. "The human protected young Danny," whispered a woman from the planet Vega. "He did not beg when Kexdal shocked him," said another slave. "He shares his food with the sick ones," added Grix. As the days passed, more slaves began to talk to Jake. They told him about their home worlds, their families, their lives before the Zephyrians came. Each story made Jake more determined to find a way to fight back. A month after arriving at the palace, Jake had become something he never expected to be. He was a leader among the slaves. They looked to him for hope, for strength, for the courage to remember who they were. The overseers noticed too. Kexdal began watching Jake more carefully. He increased Jake's workload and reduced his food, but Jake shared what little he had and kept helping others. One night, as Jake lay on his hard bed, Grix spoke to him quietly. "You are dangerous to them, human. They built this system on fear and hopelessness, but you give the others something to believe in. They will try to break you soon." Jake stared at the ceiling. "Let them try. You do not understand. They have ways of breaking people that go beyond pain. They will hurt others to hurt you. They will make you watch." Jake turned to look at the old Calaxian. "Then I'll have to make sure they don't get the chance." Grix was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Yes, you humans burn differently than the rest of us. Even here in this place of chains, you refuse to be defeated." Jake closed his eyes and thought about Earth, about his family, about all, the people counting on him to stay strong. Tomorrow would bring more work, more pain, more chances to help his fellow slaves remember their worth. He was ready. Queen Zelia sat on her throne made of black crystal, listening to her advisors report on the daily business of running an empire. She had ruled for 300 years, conquering world after world. Her skin shifted from deep purple to bright gold as her mood changed. Her forearms moved gracefully as she signed documents and gave orders. She was beautiful in the way a sharp knife is beautiful, dangerous and perfect. "Your Majesty," said Overseer Kexdal, bowing low before the throne, "I must report a problem with one of the human slaves." Queen Zelia's interest was caught. Humans were new to her empire. She had heard they were difficult to break, but she had not paid much attention. Every species thought they were special until they learned to obey. "What kind of problem?" she asked. The human designated as Jake Morrison refuses to submit properly. He helps other slaves, organizes them, and speaks back to the overseers. Yesterday, he prevented a fight between two slaves by talking to them. They listened to him instead of fighting. The queen's skin shifted to a curious blue color. A human slave giving orders to other slaves? How interesting. He is becoming a leader among them, Your Majesty. The other slaves look to him for guidance. They work harder when he encourages them. They share food because he tells them to help each other. This is not normal behavior for slaves. Queen Zilia had seen many species break under slavery. Some fought at first, then gave up. Others tried to escape and were caught. A few killed themselves rather than serve. But she had never heard of a slave who made other slaves stronger. Tell me more about this human. Kextel opened a datapad. He was a soldier on Earth, fought until the very end of the war. Commander Veltar said he showed no fear even when captured. He has been working in the crystal mines for 6 weeks now. And the other slaves respond to him? Yes, Your Majesty. Even slaves from different worlds listen to him. Yesterday I saw a Voltaran warrior take orders from this human. Voltarans are proud fighters who barely listen to us. But this Jake Morrison said something to him, and the Voltaran helped carry crystal blocks for weaker slaves. Queen Zilia stood up from her throne. This was very unusual. The Voltarans were almost as difficult to control as humans. If one human could make them cooperate, that was either very dangerous or very useful. I want to see this slave, she said. Your Majesty, it might be better to simply increase his punishments, break his spirit before he causes more trouble. The queen's skin flashed red with anger. Did I ask for your advice on how to handle this situation? Kextal backed away quickly. No, Your Majesty. I will bring the human to you immediately. An hour later, Jake was dragged from the worksite by 4 guards. His clothes were dirty and torn from weeks of hard labor. His hands were cut from handling the rough crystal blocks. But when he was brought into the throne room, he stood straight and looked around with curious eyes, instead of fear. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see it. Pillars of different colored crystals held up the roof. Light from the 2 suns came through crystal windows and made rainbow patterns on the floor. Hundreds of Zephyrian nobles watched from balconies above. At the center of it all sat Queen Zilia on her black crystal throne. She was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Jake had ever seen. Her skin changed colors like a sunset, and her 4 arms moved like she was conducting invisible music. So you are the human who thinks he can lead my slaves, she said. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but Jake could hear the danger underneath. The guards tried to push Jake to his knees, but he resisted. He stood as tall as he could and looked directly at the queen. I don't think I can lead anyone, Jake said. I just try to help people when I can. A murmur went through the watching nobles. No slave had ever spoken to the queen like that before. Help people? Queen Zilia's skin shifted to an interested green. You are slaves. Your only purpose is to serve the empire. Why would you waste energy helping others? Because that's what decent people do, Jake replied. We help each other. We share what we have. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Even when it brings you punishment? Especially then. The queen stood up and walked down the steps from her throne. She moved like water, smooth and graceful. When she stopped in front of Jake, he could see his reflection in her crystal-like skin. Do you know who I am, human? You're the queen of this empire. You conquered my world and made my people slaves. I am Queen Zilia, ruler of 100 worlds and billions of subjects. I have destroyed armies and broken the will of entire species. I decide who lives and who dies with a word. Jake nodded. I can see that. And yet you show me no respect. You do not kneel. You do not beg for mercy. Why? Jake thought about his answer for a moment. The collar around his neck made him feel weak, but his mind was still his own. Respect isn't something you can force from people, he said finally. Real respect has to be earned. You can make people fear you with power and violence, but fear isn't the same thing as respect. The throne room went completely silent. Even the queen seemed shocked by his words. You think I have not earned respect? She asked. Her skin was starting to turn red, which Jake guessed meant anger. I think you've earned fear, Jake said. But a leader who rules through fear alone isn't really leading. They're just bullying. Queen Zelia's 4 hands clenched into fists. No one had ever called her a bully before. No one had ever suggested that her rule was based on anything less than her natural superiority. And what would you know about leadership, slave? I know that real leaders serve their people, not the other way around. I know that strength comes from helping others, not hurting them. I know that the best leaders are the ones who make everyone around them stronger. Is that what you think you are doing with my slaves? Making them stronger? I'm reminding them that they're people, not property. That they have worth beyond what they can carry or build. That they deserve to be treated with dignity. The Queen walked in a slow circle around Jake, studying him like he was some strange new type of animal. You fascinate me, human. Most slaves break within days of arriving here. They learn to keep their heads down and follow orders, but you seem to become more defiant with each passing day. Maybe that's because I'm not really a slave, Jake said. I'm a prisoner of war. There's a difference. What difference? A slave accepts their condition. A prisoner of war is just waiting for the right moment to escape. Queen Zelia laughed, a sound like crystal bells ringing. Escape? From Christos? From my palace? That is impossible. Maybe, but that doesn't mean. I'll stop trying. The Queen's skin shifted through several colors before settling on a deep, thoughtful purple. This human was unlike anything she had encountered before. Most species had a breaking point. Push hard enough, and they would submit. But this Jake Morrison seemed to get stronger under pressure. Tell me, human, what do you think of my empire? Jake looked around the magnificent throne room, then back at the Queen. I think it's built on suffering. I think you take the best from other worlds and give nothing back. I think you've confused conquest with achievement. And what would you do differently? I'd ask instead of taking. I'd trade instead of stealing. I'd make allies instead of slaves. That sounds very idealistic. Do you think such methods would build an empire like mine? Jake shook his head. No, but they might build something better. Queen Zelia stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back to her throne. You are either very brave or very foolish, Jake Morrison. Probably both. Indeed. The Queen sat down and studied him some more. I think I will keep you close by. You amuse me. And it has been a very long time since anyone has amused me. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Somehow, he didn't think amusing the Queen was going to be a good thing. For 3 days after meeting Queen Zelia, Jake noticed that everything had changed. The guards watched him more closely. His work assignments got harder. His food portions got smaller. But the worst part was that other slaves were being punished because of him. When Nina from Altair was caught sharing her bread with a sick Calaxian, she got 20 lashes with the shock whip. When young Danny dropped a crystal block, the overseer made him carry 2 blocks instead of helping him. When Grix tried to help an injured Voltaran, he was locked in a punishment cell for 2 days without food. Jake could see what was happening. Queen Zelia was testing him. She wanted to see if hurting others would break his spirit. Every time a friend got punished, the guards would look at Jake to see his reaction. It was working. Jake felt guilty every time someone suffered because of his actions. But Grix pulled him aside one evening and gave him advice. Do not blame yourself for their cruelty, the old Calaxian said. They have always hurt us. Now they just have a new excuse. If you give up your spirit to protect us, then we all lose hope. But people are getting hurt because of me. People were getting hurt before you came. At least now we remember why we should stay strong. On the 4th day, Jake was working in the main construction area when he saw something that made him forget. All caution. A group of Zephyrian soldiers were beating a young girl from the planet Vega. She couldn't have been more than 14 years old. They were hitting her because she had tried to help an old man who had collapsed from heat exhaustion. Jake dropped the crystal block he was carrying and ran toward the soldiers. Stop, he shouted. She's just a child. The soldiers turned to look at him. One of them, a tall Zephyrian with silver skin, smiled coldly. "The child must learn discipline," the soldier said. She interfered with proper punishment procedures. Proper punishment for what? Helping someone who is dying? Slaves do not make decisions about who lives or dies. That is for us to decide. Jake knelt down next to the girl. Her face was bruised and she was crying. "Are you hurt badly?" She shook her head, but Jake could see she was lying. Her arm was bent at a wrong angle. "Her arm is broken," Jake said to the soldiers. "She needs medical attention." Slaves receive medical attention when we decide they need it. Jake stood up slowly. His hands were shaking with anger. "You're going to let a child suffer with a broken arm because you don't want to look weak? We are not weak, we are in control." "No," Jake said, his voice getting louder. "You're cowards. You beat children and old people because they can't fight back. That doesn't make you strong, that makes you pathetic." The silver-skinned soldier raised his shock stick. "You forget your place, human. My place is standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves." Jake helped the girl to her feet with her good arm. "I'm taking her to get help." "You will do no such thing. Try to stop me." The soldier activated his shock stick and swung it at Jake. But Jake had been expecting this. He grabbed the soldier's wrist and twisted hard. The shock stick fell to the ground. For a moment, everyone in the work area stopped what they were doing. A slave had just attacked a Zephyrian soldier. It was unthinkable. More soldiers came running. Within seconds, Jake was surrounded. They beat him down with their shock sticks until he couldn't stand. Then they dragged him away while the other slaves watched in silence. Jake woke up in a dark cell deep underground. His body hurt everywhere, and he could taste blood in his mouth. After what felt like hours, the cell door opened, and Queen Zilia walked in. She was alone, which surprised Jake. Her skin was a deep, angry red color. "You attacked one of my soldiers," she said. "I defended a child. You assaulted a member of my military in front of hundreds of witnesses." Jake tried to sit up, but his ribs hurt too much. "Your soldier was beating a 14-year-old girl. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to mind your own business and continue working. I can't do that. It's not who I am." Queen Zilia knelt down so she was at eye level with Jake. "Do you understand what you have done? You have challenged my authority in front of my subjects. You have shown defiance that could inspire others to rebel. You have forced me to make an example of you. So make your example." "Oh, I intend to." The queen stood up. "Tomorrow, you will receive 100 lashes in the main courtyard. Every slave in the palace will be required to watch. They will see what happens to those who forget their place." Jake looked up at her. "And you think that will break me?" "I think it will kill you. Very slowly and very painfully. But first it will show every slave in my empire what happens when they listen to ideas about dignity and resistance." "What if it doesn't work the way you think it will?" Queen Zelia's skin shifted to a confused blue. "What do you mean?" "What if seeing me get whipped doesn't scare them? What if it makes them angry instead?" "That is impossible. I have used public punishment for 3 centuries. It always works." Jake managed to smile despite the pain. "You've never had to deal with humans before. We don't break the way you think we should." The queen stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the door. "We will see, human. We will see." The next morning, Jake was dragged from his cell into the bright sunlight of the main courtyard. Hundreds of slaves had been forced to gather and watch. They stood in silent rows, their heads down, their spirits seemingly broken. Jake looked up at the whipping post that had been set up in the center of the courtyard. It was made of black crystal and had chains to hold the victim's arms. Behind it, Queen Zilia sat on a portable throne watching with cold eyes. "Let this be a lesson to all who would forget their place," she announced. Her voice carried across the courtyard through hidden speakers. "Rebellion brings only pain." The guards chained Jake to the post. His shirt was torn away, leaving his back exposed. He could feel hundreds of eyes watching him. Overseer Vexmore stepped forward with the punishment whip. It was made of energy that could cut flesh without killing. Jake had seen what it could do to other slaves. 100 lashes, Queen Zilia declared. Jake closed his eyes and prepared for the pain. But then he had an idea. If he was going to suffer, he might as well make it count. The first lash cut across his back like fire. Jake gritted his teeth, and then spoke in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "My name is Jake Morrison. I am from Earth. I am not your property." The second lash fell. The pain was terrible, but Jake kept talking. "I had a family. I had friends. I had a life before you took it away from me." By the fifth lash, Jake could hear murmuring from the crowd of slaves. By the 10th lash, some of them were looking up, instead of staring at the ground. "We are not animals," Jake said through gritted teeth as the 15th lash fell. "We are people. We have names. We have stories. We have worth." Now other voices were joining his. Grix straightened his bent back and said, "I am Grix of Kalax. I had a son who died fighting for freedom." Nina from Altair lifted her head. "I am Nina. I was a teacher. I taught children to read and dream." By the 20th lash, the entire courtyard was filled with voices. Hundreds of slaves were declaring their names, their histories, their refusal to be forgotten. Queen Zilia watched in growing horror as her perfect system of control crumbled before her eyes. The punishment that was supposed to break their spirits was making them stronger. At the 50th lash, something changed in Jake. The pain was so great that his mind went to a strange, calm place. He could see everything clearly now. He understood what needed to happen next. The queen had made a mistake. She had given him an audience. The 50th lash tore across Jake's back, but he barely felt it anymore. His mind had gone to a place beyond pain. He could hear the voices of hundreds of slaves around him, all declaring their names and refusing to be silent. Queen Zelia's skin had turned from red to purple to a sickly yellow color. This was not how public punishments were supposed to work. The slaves should be cowering in fear, not finding courage. "Silence!" she screamed from her throne. "All of you will be silent." But her voice was lost in the growing noise of the crowd. More slaves were speaking up every second. They were remembering who they were before the collars, before the chains, before the fear. Overseer Vexmore raised the whip for the 51st strike. But as it came down toward Jake's torn back, something impossible happened. Jake twisted. His body caught the energy whip with his bare hands and yanked hard. Vexmore stumbled forward, caught off balance. The whip was designed to hurt flesh, but Jake's hands were already so damaged that he barely felt the burning energy. His grip was strong from months of carrying crystal blocks. "That's for every person you've hurt," Jake said through gritted teeth. Then he did something that should have been impossible. The chains holding him to the whipping post were made of Zephyrian metal, designed to hold the strongest slaves. But Jake had been watching the guards for weeks. He had seen how they locked and unlocked the chains. More importantly, he had noticed that the chains were old and had been repaired many times. While everyone stared in shock, Jake worked his right hand free from a weak connection in the chain. His hand was slippery with blood, which helped him slide it through the metal loop. Before Vexmore could recover, Jake's fist connected with the overseer's jaw. The sound echoed across the courtyard like a gunshot. Vexmore fell backward, unconscious. The whip flew from his hands and landed at Jake's feet. For a moment, the entire courtyard was silent. Then Nina from Altair started clapping. The sound was joined by Grix, then by young Danny, then by hundreds of other slaves. Queen Zilia stood up from her throne, her forearms trembling with rage. "Guards, kill him now." But the guards hesitated. They were used to dealing with broken slaves who could barely lift their heads. Jake Morrison stood bloody but unbroken before them, and behind him were hundreds of slaves who were no longer afraid. "You heard me," the queen screamed. "Kill the human." The guards raised their weapons, but they never got the chance to fire. Grix, the old Calaxian who had been a slave for 50 years, picked up a piece of broken crystal from the ground and threw it at the nearest guard. His aim was perfect. The crystal hit the guard's weapon and knocked it from his hands. For my son, Grick shouted. That was the signal everyone had been waiting for. The uprising began with a roar that shook the crystal buildings around the courtyard. Nina and a dozen other Altarians rushed the guards on the left side. Young Danny and the other human prisoners attacked from the right. The Voltaran warriors, who had been slaves for only 2 years, remembered how to fight and joined the battle with fierce joy. Jake worked his left hand free from the chain and picked up the energy whip. He had never used one before, but he had watched the overseers for months. He cracked it toward a group of guards who were trying to organize a defense. The weapon stores are in the east building, shouted a Calaxian who had worked in maintenance. If we can get there, we can arm everyone. Jake looked around the courtyard. The slaves outnumbered the guards by at least 20 to 1, but the guards had better weapons and armor. This fight would be won by speed and surprise, not by strength. Nina, take 50 people to the east building, Jake called out. Grix, get everyone else to the communication center. We need to tell the slaves in other parts of the city what's happening. You think you can give orders to us? Called out a Voltaran warrior named Krex. I'm not giving orders, Jake replied, dodging a plasma bolt from a guard's weapon. I'm making suggestions. You're free to ignore them. Krex grinned, showing sharp teeth. I like your suggestions, human. They are good suggestions. The battle spread beyond the courtyard quickly. Slaves working in other parts of the palace heard the noise and came running. When they saw their fellow prisoners fighting back, they joined the uprising without hesitation. Queen Zelia retreated to her throne room with her personal guards. She activated the palace's defense systems, sealing doors and calling for reinforcements from the city. But the palace had been built by slaves, and many of them knew its secrets. There are maintenance tunnels under the throne room, said an old vegan slave. I helped build them 40 years ago. Jake was binding his wounded hands with strips of cloth torn from his shirt. The whip burns were painful, but he could still fight. Can you get us inside? Yes, but it will be dangerous. The queen will have her best guards with her. Everything we've done today has been dangerous, Jake said, but we're still here. The tunnel was narrow and dark. Jake led a small group through it, including Grix, Nina, Krex the Voltaran, and a dozen others. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of fighting as more slaves joined the rebellion. They emerged in a storage room just below the throne room. Through the crystal floor, they could see Queen Zelia pacing back and forth, speaking rapidly into a communication device. She's calling for the military, Nina whispered. If warships come, we'll all be killed. Then we better stop her before they get here, Jake said. They burst through the floor of the throne room using tools they had taken from guards. Queen Zelia spun around, her skin flashing between colors so fast it hurt to look at. How did you get in here? She demanded. The same way your slaves built this place, Jake replied, by working together and never giving up. The queen's personal guards moved to protect her, but they were outnumbered. More importantly, they were facing enemies who had nothing left to lose. The fight was short but fierce. When it was over, Queen Zelia stood alone in her throne room, surrounded by former slaves who were no longer afraid of her. You cannot win, she said, her voice shaking. My empire has 1 million soldiers. They will come and crush this rebellion. Jake walked up to her slowly. His back was still bleeding from the whipping, and his hands were burned from the energy. Whip, but his eyes were clear and determined. Maybe they will, he said, but it won't matter. You made a mistake today. You showed every slave in your empire that we can fight back. You showed them that you're not gods. You're just bullies with better weapons. What do you want? The queen asked. I want you to send a message to every world in your empire. Tell them what happened here today. Tell them that the slaves of Christos are free. And if I refuse? Jake looked around at his friends. Grix was smiling for the first time in 50 years. Nina was helping treat the wounded with supplies from the queen's medical kit. Young Danny was standing tall and proud, no longer afraid. Then, we'll tell them ourselves, Jake said. Within hours, the news of the Christos uprising spread across the galaxy. Slaves on 100 worlds heard that their brothers and sisters had fought back and won. Many of them decided to try the same thing. The Zephyrian Empire, built on the idea that some beings were naturally superior to others, began to crumble. World after world rose in rebellion. The Queen's mighty warships found themselves fighting not just armies but entire populations who refused to be slaves. Jake Morrison became a legend, but he never forgot that the real victory belonged to everyone who had found the courage to stand up and say no more. Years later, when peace treaties were signed and new governments were formed, when former slaves became leaders of their own worlds, Jake would think back to that day in the courtyard. He had been whipped for defending others, but in the end, it was the others who had set him free. The galaxy learned an important lesson that day. Humans and all who stood with them would never kneel to tyrants again. Freedom, once tasted, could never be forgotten.